The ultimate teachings about Vedanta are hidden in a warrior code. You see, the most sublime Vedantic text, beyond the Upanishads, beyond the Brahma Sutras, is the Yoga Vasisht. It is a dialogue between the young Prince Ram and the sage Vasisht. It brings out those qualities which are required for living and dying in a noble manner. That is the way of the warrior. Ram is a Kshatriya. His code is that of a warrior, his training is that of a warrior, yet he is beset by all sorts of spiritual doubts. And by, through the text, his doubts are clarified, his doubts are cleared. He understands that consciousness is the only reality. Body and mind are just small manifestations of it. We are not to identify ourselves with our body and mind complex. We are to identify ourselves with the consciousness itself. Behind it, beyond it, the procreator of it. And so doing, we become real warriors in life. We become fearless warriors in life. We become noble warriors in life. That is the ideal of Arya. That is the ideal also of the warrior code in various parts. Let's look at Japan, where the Vedantic essence of warriorhood has been reflected most beautifully through the samurai warrior code called bushido. Bushido completely reflects that core teaching of Vedanta about not being caught in the fixed attitudes of mind, but to go beyond these fixed attitudes of mind, to go beyond the anxieties and worries of the mind, and realize one's inner richness. And realizing one's inner richness is what makes you an ultimate warrior. You realize yourself to be pure bliss. You realize yourself to be pure consciousness, pure awareness. And so doing, you are able to go into the battle with great courage within your heart, with great bliss within your heart, with no fear within your heart, yet at the same time with a sense of responsibility. So the ideal of Ram being representative of the person who can take on the ultimate responsibility, who can shoulder the worries of others also. That is what a warrior does. He is able to fight for you and me. He or she is able to make the ultimate sacrifice for you and me. The individuality is destroyed within the warrior. There is something immensely unique and individual in each warrior, but the sense of doing only for one's individual self has evaporated. And that is the Vedantic state. That is the state of Aham Brahmasmi. That is the state of Analhak. That is the state of the kingdom of God is within you. That is the state of I and my Father in heaven are one. So you see, all the religions of the world echo this ultimate truth of Vedanta, which is an identification with the highest awareness, the highest consciousness, and through that you come to a simple distance between your worries and yourself, a distance between your anxieties and yourself. Do not think the worries are you. Do not think the anxieties in you. Like Arjun on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, like Arjun who has listened to the Bhagavad Gita of the Divine Lord. Be free of your identification with worries and anxieties. And so doing, become like Arjun, the fearless warrior. Then there is real purpose in life. There is no frustration in life. You are living the life of a true warrior. So you see, what I've done is I try and join the different dots of the warrior code that exist throughout the world. It could be the warrior code of ancient India, that of the era of Ram, that of the era of Krishna. It could be the warrior code of Japan. It could be the warrior code, in a way, that code of fearlessness represented by the Abrahamic religions. When Jesus identifies himself with the highest consciousness, the kingdom of God is within you. I and my Father in heaven are one. Or of the Sufi Mansur also, who is actually against the rigid dogma of his time and echoed the Vedantic truth of Aham Brahmasmi in his own way, in his own language. So the warrior code is not about literally going to the battlefield, but is about looking at life as a great big battlefield. There is death, there is life, everything. That it is a metaphor. The battlefield is an ultimate metaphor for all our aspirations, all our experiences. There, death happens, but a rebirth of consciousness can happen, as it happened in the case of Arjun. A rebirth of bliss, a rebirth of what all you hold sacred in your life. So that is the main understanding. Realize that everything else is insignificant. Your innermost core matters, and the warrior is simply concerned with the innermost core of being, the inner phenomenon of being, the inner treasure of being, acting from an intuitive state, acting from an instinctive, inspired state, not so much by conditioned thoughts. Then only can you fight. Otherwise, if you overthink it, you cannot fight, you cannot move. So the whole philosophy of dynamism is in life is the philosophy of the warrior code. To keep your innermost core always in a state which is positive. To keep your innermost core in a state which is not thinking of the results. And that is what Krishna is telling Arjuna on the battlefield. Forget about the results. Forget about all that nonsense. Simply be concerned with the innocence of consciousness within your being. Through that purity of consciousness, realize the highest consciousness. Then you come to the only reality which exists. All that you see around you is just a Maya living and dying. That is not ultimate reality. Ultimate reality is comprised of consciousness alone. See that alone, then all your tensions, your anxieties, your running helter-skelter all ceases. You come to a tranquil state, a calm state, a state where you find the splendor shining bright within you. Then no physical harm can never make you afraid, because the greatest energy becomes available to you. The greatest realization that I am not the body, I am not the mind, I am beyond. I am in the state of Turiya, beyond all definitions. I am in the fourth state of being, beyond body, heart, mind, everything. I exist in tandem with the highest reality. Through that you find your harmony with all that exists. You find your harmony with nature, your harmony with consciousness, your harmony with God consciousness also. Your harmony with the larger universe, the larger cosmos. You are a child of that largeness. You're a child of that vastness. Nothing can ultimately harm you. You are part of a great beauty. You're part of a great richness. Realize this beauty, realize this richness, and then you come to an utterly cool and calm state within your being. You come to a state of stillness within your being. You come to a state of inner silence within your being, and that is all that matters. All other dimensions are simply irrelevant when it comes to the dimension of this mystic realization. So as a warrior, you are prepared to fight, but deep inside you are absolutely tranquil. You transcend body-mind. You transcend your anxieties. You transcend your thoughts, and you come to a consciousness which is infinite. You come to a creativity which is infinite. You come to a joy which is infinite. You come to a love which is infinite. You come to a blissfulness which is infinite. And so doing, you come into the meditative state effortlessly. So the meditation of the warrior is not an outward meditation where he's sitting and meditating. No, it is a meditation which can happen on the battlefield also. So Arjun does not go into a typical pose of meditativeness. Not at all. That is not the point. The point is coming to a meditativeness that can come through battle also. And that is one of the most important lessons of the Bhagavad Gita. Krishna is telling us that forget about all your meditations and so on. Even on the battlefield, you can fight in a meditative state. What to say about other activities in your life? So you can create the state of meditativeness no matter what you're doing. Meditation is not a doing, it is an attitude. It is the way you look upon any activity in life. From discontentment, it can take you to contentment. So you see, two people in an office can be doing the same work. They could be cleaning the office, for example. Now, one person does it like a great suffering, like a great misery, wants to do it as quickly as possible, get it over and done with. So the work will never be as good compared to the other person who might be doing it with much bliss in his heart, with much joy in his or her soul. And so doing, through that state of calmness, coolness, that person is not only creating a clean office, but is also creating a vibration of tranquility, is also helping create an energy within that office space, which is truly meaningful. And that is what ultimately matters. So it is the consciousness that you fight the battle with. It is the consciousness that you do a task with. It is the consciousness that you do any particular job with, which is the substratum. And that is, substratum is what is important. Outer manifestations are never as important as the substratum of what you're doing. Celebrate that substratum. That is the only thing that matters. That is what makes you more and more affluent within your being. What is meant by affluent living? Inner richness of living, quality of living. It is a feeling, it is a tremendous feeling that whatever is being done is beyond the thought of failure or success. It is beyond those conclusions. Forget about the conclusions. Look at the process itself. If the process is correct, the conclusion will be okay. There's no problem. And even if you are defeated at the end, it doesn't matter. Everybody is defeated. Everybody dies. That is not the point. The secret to living an ecstatic life in the midst of everything, that is the warrior's code. That is the song of bliss, which is the Bhagavad Gita. That is the song of bliss, which is the song of the Zen masters who taught bushido to the samurai warriors. It is the same thing, just expressed in different ways. So that is the beauty of Vedanta. Vedanta is about inner abundance. It is about emptying the mind. And when you empty the mind of all its conditioned content, then only the heart can become full of courage. Then only can the ego disappear. And when ego disappears, there is nothing to fear. You see, our biggest problem is our ego gets hurt. Remove the ego, there's nothing to get hurt. Now that is the way of Taoism. That is the way of Lao Tzu. That is the Chinese way of martial art in its essence, that which a Bruce Lee represents. Remove the ego and there's nothing that can be hurt. Maximum the body will be hurt, but your soul will be intact. Your consciousness will be intact. The meditative space within you will be intact. So Lao Tzu teaches a state of being where the ego is so completely removed that you're completely relaxed. It doesn't matter whether you are victorious or defeated. But you will definitely go into the battle with a state of flowing within your heart. You will definitely go with a great energy within your heart because there's no ego left. So you're able to flow. Ego is like a boundary. It's like a dam. It dams up the flow of the river. Wholeheartedness is needed for the warrior. A reluctance is not needed. Wholeheartedness is needed. And wholeheartedness is the key to courage. A wholehearted warrior is the courageous warrior. The half-hearted warrior is always the cowardly warrior. And wholeheartedness means nourishing yourself in such a way from within that you are able to break through all barriers. And the biggest barrier is the barrier of our thoughts, telling us what can't be done. Very often, the mind says, oh, it can do things, but on the other hand, there's always a small voice which says, which can't be done. So the mind oscillates between the superiority complex and inferiority complex. Now, the warrior code means staying in balance, in the middle. neither in a superiority complex nor in an inferiority complex, neither underestimating your enemy nor overestimating your enemy, neither underestimating yourself nor overestimating yourself, identifying yourself with a higher principle. And when you identify with the higher principle of bliss and consciousness, that is the way that you can move with great dynamism. Then you are dispossessed of the egoistic feelings which accompany you. Leave those aside. And when you leave those aside, the real miracle starts happening. You start finding yourself more and more fearless in life. You start finding yourself more and more dynamic in life. That is the rebirth. That is the resurrection. That is the unburdening of all your nonsensical anxieties which have accompanied you. Leave that baggage. What will come, leave it. Just be blissful here and now. Just be joyful, meditative, calm, tranquil, in the here and now. When this kind of centering happens within the warrior who's going into battle, then he or she goes in with a great dynamism, a great crescendo and cyclone of energy. That is why after the Bhagavad Gita, Arjun starts becoming tremendously more powerful. His energy has arisen to a degree where he's functioning like a pure instrument of the Lord, unstoppable. And that is the state within which he's acting. So he is carrying the energy of the universe within himself. You see, all of us have a miniature strength of the universe within ourselves. The problem is we don't tap it. Tapping into the strength of our innate universe is the key to the warrior code. It means being spontaneous. It means flowing with the energy of the larger. It means being clear and open in heart and mind so that the energy of the larger fills you up. And when the energy of the larger fills you up, there is nothing to be afraid of. Or your consciousness becomes exceedingly energetic. Your consciousness becomes exceedingly strong. You start becoming more and more tremendously empowered within yourself. And in that way, you're able to come to a situation when nothing can make you fall. You rise higher in your awareness. And rising higher in your awareness, you rise above all fears. You rise above the state of despair. You see, most of us live in a state of despair, quiet desperation. Something or the other keeps nagging us. The true warrior who spiritually realizes says, let despair come, let hopelessness come. I don't identify with them because I know they are just thought processes from the mind, whereas I am pure consciousness. Hence, I move beyond them and I am able to do whatever I have to do with a state of great fearlessness. So the true warrior is out of the hypnosis of the mind. The mind is a self-hypnotizing mechanism. It does not allow us to become peaceful simply because it keeps injecting thoughts into us. And most of the thoughts are thoughts about what will happen or what may not happen. This kind of suspense about the tomorrow. And a lot of resentment about the past. This should not have happened, this should have happened. So taken in combination, both these factors start creating poison within the moment that you have. The true warrior looks at life as sublime, sacred, totally transcendent to all these noises of the mind. And then you find that soundless space within you, that space of silence, which is the space of yoga, of Zen, of Vedanta, of Tantra, and so on, of Mahamudra itself. And in that way, you find the truly religious. You find that which is exalted, that which is wonderful and marvelous. Within you as an inner treasure, you're no longer a slave to the mind and its anxiety-creating mechanism. And when you're out of this anxiety creation mechanism of the mind, you're able to move into a completely new blissfulness, a completely new radiant sense of youthfulness, no matter what happens on the battlefield. You echo with your self-bliss. And when you echo with your self-bliss, there is nothing to stop you. There is nothing to stop you because you find that the only true leader within the world is the energy of the universe. Human leaders come and die. Human ideologies come and die. That which is your guide, that which leads you on, is a greater spiritual guide, the voice of your innermost consciousness. That voice of Krishna, which is also echoing within you, as it echoed to Arjun, is also available to you. Suddenly you find that that vision is magnificent. You see, Krishna is not taken to be just a historic figure, no. Krishna is taken to be the ever-alive creative principle in the universe. And that is always young, that is always available. Arjun lived and died, but this creative principle of the universe exists still, as youthful as it always was. If you understand this basic principle, then you come to a greater freedom of being. You come to a greater beauty of being, because you realize that all energies within life are part of this divine energy. All are simply reflections of this greater sense of energy which has always been creative, which is bringing about the stars into existence every day, every moment, which is also destroying the old. So this cyclical destruction and creation is going on even now, just as it was during Arjun's time. That is not static, that is moving on in a circle. When you understand that state of suchness, that state of creativity, then you take a quantum jump into a higher reality. The warrior code means taking a quantum leap into a higher reality, where you're not imprisoned by your thoughts about personal safety, personal welfare as such, but you're concerned with a personal blissfulness, a personal awareness. You're not so concerned about getting hurt or escaping the battlefield or how to save yourself. Not at all. It's simply how to rise to a higher consciousness. That is the essence of the truly great warrior. So warriorhood, which is to be practical, which is to help us to attain to a state of equilibrium, to attain to a state of samyata, as it's called, balance, to a state of calm. That is the true unbounded space of the mystic warrior. And within that unbounded space comes about all those values which are truly to be respected within the world. You see, the mind is of a certain shallowness. The mind does not realize the greater depths and the greater truths of life unless it comes face to face with greatest dangers. So you must have heard people see their whole life flash before their eyes when they are faced with danger of some sort. Now there's a reason for this. Suddenly, in a flash, when confronted by death, we are confronted by the ultimate. And hence we are able in that moment to leave everything else behind, but just concentrate on the most essential. So what happens is life comes into a very sharp focus. Now, that is why the battlefield has always been used as a metaphor, as an analogy for life itself, be it in the Bhagavad Gita or be it in the Zen philosophy of Japan. The battlefield of life is taken to be the ultimate ground for lessons in life, because there you are truly listening. It's not like a classroom where you can afford to miss the lesson. The professor is talking and your mind is elsewhere. When Krishna is talking on the battlefield, Arjuna is in a real dharam sankat. He's in a real panic. He's in a real situation about what will happen, what will not happen. He's in a real state of despair because the questions of life and death are facing him. It is not about listening to an empty lecture or being in a satsang and so on. It is about the consciousness here and now, within the important moment, within the moment of life and death. And that is all that matters. Hence, Arjun is able to go beyond the boundaries of the familiar spirituality. The familiar spirituality means what? It means listening to a sermon, listening to a lecture, being taught moral things. Arjun has gone beyond that because Krishna is teaching him now about the ultimate questions in a way which is of ultimate importance, because there is nothing greater than the question of life and death. So there's a wholehearted attention of Arjun, and that is what is truly important. So you see, what is really interesting about the warrior code is that it is tremendously blissful, because it takes us beyond the normal modes of spiritual learning. The normal modes of spiritual learning are going and listening to some person who's learned in spirituality, sitting in meditation and saying a few mantras. Well, that is okay, but that is lukewarm compared to the warrior code. The warrior code means you're going into battle, but you're going into battle in a spiritual state. So you have everything to lose. And in a way, you have nothing to lose, because the ultimate is at stake. You can die at the maximum. So you put yourself completely at the altar. You're ready to sacrifice your own being also. And only when you are ready to sacrifice your own being does true learning happen in the spiritual sphere. So you'll see, as Sri Ramakrishna used to say about how desperate he was to attain to a vision of the Divine Mother. This very desperation pushed him to a creative force of being. Eventually he took the sword in the temple and was about to kill himself, is when he got the divine vision. So he used to say that only if you're as desperate for God as you would be a drowning person seeking breath, then only will you come to God realization, higher realization. And that is the way of the warrior. So this essence of the warrior code is not just about one particular country, one particular nation, and so on. It's a universal quality of nobility, of transcendence of our ordinary fears, our ordinary anxieties, our ordinary misgivings. So within the knights of King Arthur, you'd find this nobility, this warrior code. The Knights Templar, the North American Indian warriors. Within warriorhoods everywhere, within African warriors and tribes, how they could transcend the ordinary working of the anxious mind through their ritual war dances, through their sense of bonding, as going into a situation which is about the common good, which is a fight for justice and so on. So Arjun goes into the battle peaceful, calm, with a great equilibrium within his heart, because he goes beyond the skin-deep ideas of life and death. He's able to go beyond the ideas of skin-deep consciousness of mind and body. He starts understanding mind and body to be only reflections of a greater reality. And he starts understanding that his concern is to be with the greater reality. And that greater reality is that vastness of consciousness from which all things come, which is the parent of all material things. The spiritual dimension is the parent of the material dimension. That is the idea which the warrior goes in with, and realizing that there is no misery, realizing that brings him or her to a great sense of decisiveness, to an ability to make decisions very quickly. You see, one of the most fundamental things when it comes to warriorhood, to being a fighter, to being a warrior, is the ability to make decisions in a split second. It's like that pilot who's sitting in that fighter jet. Being able to make a decision in a split second is the key. Now, this requires clarity of consciousness. The mind needs to be in a clear state. And the clearing of the mind is the basis of all religions. It is essentially the basis of Vedanta and Hinduism. It is also the ideal of Buddhism. It is the ideal of Jainism. It is the ideal of the Sikh religion. It is the ideal of Mahamudra of Tibet. It is very much the ideal of Zen Buddhism, of Taoism of China, of the Abrahamic religions also, ultimately. Clearing your mind of its useless content, which keep making you oscillate between states of happiness and unhappiness. That is not needed by the warrior. The warrior is not, the warrior's consciousness is not about being either in a happy state or an unhappy state. No, he's completely transcended these feelings. He's in a state of calmness, and the state of calmness is the middle way. It is neither overjoyed nor over depressed at all. It sees the reality of human suffering, but is not so affected that it wallows in despair. At the same time, it sees joy and bliss within the universe, but is not completely abandoned to that sense of recklessness. No. The ability to be in the middle, to realize one's responsibilities, but at the same time transcends one's sense of mind and thoughts is the key. You see, thoughts can often be our enemy. For the warrior, thoughts can be the greatest enemy. It's not the enemy who's the enemy as such, but the thoughts. So for Arjun, the Kauravas are not the real enemy. His own consciousness has become his enemy. His own mind has become his own enemy. He's assailed, he's attacked by those thoughts of anxiety, depression, and so on. And that is the whole key. You see, a depressed person is who? A depressed person is he or she who's losing their battle against thoughts. A truly fulfilled person brings totality of realization into their awareness, into their consciousness. Brings a totality of integrated clarity. That integrated clarity is the way of the warrior. That integrated clarity is the way also of the monk. So the monk and the warrior are not separated. The monk and the warrior are simply two aspects of the same coin. Traditionally in religion, monkhood and warriorhood are kept apart. The monk is not supposed to be a warrior. The warrior is not supposed to be a monk. You see, this is the objection that Jains had against Krishna. That why did Krishna not stop Arjun from fighting the battle of Kurukshetra? Arjun could have become a monk, he could have taken the way of ahimsa, of peace, but no. With Krishna's vision, both aspects are ultimately reflective of the universe. Violence and death is reflective of the universe. We are prone to physical injury. We are prone to physical annihilation. Let's not negate that. And at the same time, the meditative aspect of the monk is also needed. So Krishna is making Arjun not run away from warriorhood, but within himself is inculcating some qualities of monkhood. That is important. The quality of monkhood is important, not the robe of monkhood, not the clothes of monkhood. Those are all just part of the ritualistic part of religion, the karma kanda. The jnana kanda, the realization part of true Vedanta, is to give up the neurotic tendencies of the mind. And the neurotic tendencies of the mind are those which take us into a regressive state of anxiety, into a regressive state of fear. Fear becomes regressive for the warrior. Yes, fear is a good mechanism in all beings because it keeps us away from danger. For example, you're walking through a jungle. And your sense of fear can keep you alive because you're more alert about things around you. But if you become totally in a state of fear, you're not able to gather the courage to move out of that jungle, to find your path out. You become paralyzed, as it were. You become like that rabbit caught in the headlights of the car, not able to do anything. So shaken with fright that you're completely still and paralyzed, and not able to move. Inwardly shaken, outwardly immobile. What's the point? So your inner harmony is not available. You are not able to rise up to a higher sense of purpose. And when you don't rise up to a higher sense of purpose, you become exploited by weaker teachings. You become exploited by weaker tendencies. You become exploited by your sense of fear. Fear has the ability to take over your life if you allow it to. See, the choice for the warrior is this. If he or she keeps dwelling on the physical act of death, of being hurt at the physical level, of losing and so on, the shame and so on, that very fear can create weakness within the warrior. That very psychological fear can create weakness within the warrior. You see, in the modern age, you look at a fighter in the boxing ring, somebody like Muhammad Ali. They used to say that Muhammad Ali is to win the fight before the fight itself. He's to win the bout because he's to demoralize the opponent. So especially when you see his fights with Joe Frazier and so on. He's had great battles within the boxing ring, but often he's to demoralize the opponent before the fighting by his whole attitude of confidence, overconfidence, sometimes deriding the opponent, sometimes using wit, sometimes using wisdom, sometimes using complete buffoonery also to deride the other. And some people sometimes, like Joe Frazier, used to fall into Muhammad Ali's trap. They used to lose their temper and then they used to go into the boxing ring, not completely as good as they are meant to be. But of course, sometimes it works differently. Sometimes Ali did it he overdid it. So Joe Frazier came back with a feeling of vengeance and he actually hammered Ali into submission. So the good warrior is somebody who does not taunt the enemy too much, but at the same time, through confidence, through self-bliss, is able to inculcate a feeling within the other that, see, I am no walkover. You'll have to be your best to fight me. That sense of confidence you'll find in great generals on the battlefield. That sense of confidence you'll find in the Prithviraj Chauhan and Alexander and so on. They're able to inspire within their troops this great confidence. A Chandragupta Maurya, for example. And when the troops feel that courage, they come spontaneously to a feeling of realized courage within themselves. So at a very deep level, the vibe of this fearlessness, the vibe of this spiritual mystical fearlessness, not being afraid of anything and realizing yourself to be part of a higher existence, a higher purpose, creates leadership qualities for the warrior, for the leader, because it creates a charisma. People get attracted to a person who's able to raise their mind above the physical fear of life and death and so on, of injury and so on. And so doing, that person becomes a greater general, becomes a greater leader. So the qualities of patience, the qualities of courage, the qualities of being non-disturbed by whatever come in one's way is the way of the warrior. It's about synthesizing all one's energies and through that self-synthesis coming towards a meditative energy. That meditative energy cannot be destroyed by any enemy. So as Krishna tells Arjun, he says, your soul, know your soul to be such that it cannot be cut, it cannot be burnt, it cannot be wet. When you realize yourself as that soul, what is there to be afraid of? What is there to be intellectually concerned about? There is nothing for you to fear. You are beyond all these limiting circumstances. Know yourself to be beyond these limiting circumstances, and then nothing can stop your success. Nothing can stop you moving into a higher degree of successful living. You are bound to succeed. Living as a victor or being a defeated person is not got to do with the battlefield then. With the result, it's got to do with the quality of being. And when your quality of being is such, you're able to move higher. You're able to move more consciously, more alertly into an inner world of richness. You're able to live more spontaneously, authentically. And completely in a state where your natural power of creativity and your natural sense of self-power is able to override your sense of fear. So you see, in the modern age, there have been 2 world wars fought. Now, within these world wars, there have been some very rare fighters. But one who stands apart is Rommel, the German general. You see, Rommel was a fighter who was respected even by his enemies. And why was that? He was a very noble warrior. Rommel refused to identify himself with the Nazis as such. He used to say, I'm a German soldier, I'm not a Nazi. He used to not identify himself with the political party of the Nazis. He rose above all these definitions of serving a particular political party, serving a particular Adolf Hitler and so on. He said, I'm doing my duty as a German soldier. And he was so noble in his way. He exemplified the warrior code in such a way that even the enemies who were prisoner in his camp got to respect him, because he used to operate as such. He used to not allow his soldiers to mistreat the prisoners of war, for example. So and he's regarded as the greatest warrior, in fact, in World War II. Rommel stands apart as a world warrior. in the modern age. So similarly, there have been other generals, there have been other warriors. The whole point is not that. The whole point is that the true warrior code is all about not falling into the pattern of hatred, of fighting from vengeance and hatred. No. Forget all that. It's about fighting from a tranquil, calm space of being. When you bring your individuality to a sense of calmness, then you become a valuable warrior. Then you become an enlightened warrior. So the good warrior in the mystical sense is the warrior who's awake to the higher aspects of awareness, to the higher aspects of mystical insights. That is the warrior who's respected in the Zen tradition, in the samurai tradition. So you'll see in the samurai tradition, the Book of Four Rings is written by Musashi Miyamoto, the Book of Five Rings. And that is really exemplifying the whole code of the warrior, where the warrior is not just a warrior, but the warrior is a mystical poet also. The warrior is an meditator also. The warrior feels the energy of compassion as much as he or she feels the energy of the fighter. Both things go together. It's like a railway track. The parallelism of energy is that of empathy as well as that of justice. And when these two tracks are well defined, then you can become a warrior like Arjun. So Arjun fights not from a state of hatred for the Kauravas. After the Bhagavad Gita, he fights from a state of absolute equanimity. But at the same time, he fights from a sense of justice. And all that is born out of his inner silence, his inner tranquility, his inner calmness. In a way, he personifies this whole code of the warrior.